and I were Baptists, and y'all were Methodists, weren't you, even then? So, we didn't talk church so much, but since then, we've come to recognize the distinguished career that Mike has had, not just in his life, but in his church. He gives so much of his time and his effort, and he has been one of those people that went beyond his local church and into the district and the conference. And so we welcome him today. We look forward to hearing his message. We're thankful for his and Jennifer's presence with us today. Thank you so much. And you're just wonderful.
Well, I did grow up United Methodist. All my life, I married a Presbyterian, but she saw the light. And we were going to go to church together. She knew she was going to have to become a United Methodist. When Janet called me a little while back and asked me to come and speak to you today, I wondered, so what can I say to these folks for homecoming? Well, you're 101 years old. And you know you've made it. Willard Scott will put your picture on a Smucker's jar. I got up this morning, my wife and I are spending the weekend at our place on Lake Hartwell. And I got up this morning and, as I like to do each morning, get on my iPad and check out Facebook to see what all my friends are doing. And there was a link to a story. And God sometimes has a strange way of changing things for you. I've got a message written and ready to go. And I wasn't quite sure that this was going to change all of it. I don't think it will. But in addition to Memorial Day and homecoming and the new pool, which I think is a wonderful thing, and Janet should go over and baptize it this afternoon, sprinkle it with its own water. We're also celebrating in the life of the United Methodist Church Aldersgate Day, which was yesterday. Now, a lot of folks don't understand what Aldersgate Day is in the life of John Wesley. But that was the day that he was attending a Lutheran service, and he had his conversion. Not his conversion from being not faithful to Jesus Christ, because he had been a Christian all his life. But his conversion in understanding being justified by God and through Jesus Christ. And we understand, and we often hear this expression, that at that time his heart was strangely warmed. And before I get into what I've prepared for today, I want to tell you about an instance in my life where my heart was strangely warmed. About 10 years or so ago, I was attending a workshop in Nashville, Tennessee. And I had the opportunity, because we got there early on a Friday, to go into the Upper Room Chapel at the General Board of Discipleship. If you've never been there, I would encourage you to go. There's a beautiful wooden relief of the Last Supper in the chancel. But it's a small chapel, not unlike this sanctuary. And I went in with a couple of friends who had ridden up with me from South Carolina, and we sat there. And at that particular time, my father was in the Medical University of South Carolina with a severe infection. And I found out earlier that day that his temperature had risen to 105. So I sat down in that chapel and I started praying. After a few minutes of prayer, and let me set the stage a little further. It was a cold, rainy, dreary day in January. Cloudy. And as I sat about 3 or 4 rows from the back, from the front, a light suddenly came through the stained glass windows over my shoulder. And my heart was strangely warm that day. I felt the presence of God in my prayer. I learned later that afternoon that at the time that light came through the window, my father's fever broke. Now, he didn't walk out of that hospital. A couple of weeks later, he went on to the church triumphant. Having my heart strangely warmed in that way led me to go back to my home church and start a prayer group. And we met in our home for over 9 years. Every Tuesday night, without fail, we had a small group that would come, and we would pray for one another and all other prayer requests that we knew about. But my heart was strangely warm that day. And it rekindled in me a sense of commitment to my faith in Jesus Christ. Now, like Wesley, I grew up a United Methodist. I went to church all my life. My father was my Sunday school teacher. And yet, there was a time in my life where I also had the same conversion that Wesley had. A sense of knowing that God and Jesus were in control. So, even if we've grown up in the church, grown up knowing about Jesus Christ, there comes a time in our lives where we have a sense, a personal sense, that there is something more to our lives than just what we control. And it was at that time when I turned over my life completely to Jesus and believed in his power that I knew that regardless of what I faced, I was not going to be alone. As I was preparing for today, I got on your website and read about the history of the church and how it was built on stone pillars, and a storm came by and blew it over, and it had to be rebuilt. And I think this is the third building, as I recall. Second? Okay. That tells me that there's and as I read the history, I read the names. And the first service in the new building for always, I think, a couple of funerals of folks who had participated in the building. And as I drove in today, up from Clayton, and we rode past a little ways and just drove through the countryside. This is a beautiful place. You've got a wonderful church here. And I see the community that's involved. My great-great-grandfather was a United Methodist circuit rider in the lower part of South Carolina. Back in 1987, I became a certified lay speaker in the United Methodist Church, and as such, I was called upon to substitute preach. And one year, a friend of mine who was in the course of study asked me to preach at three of her churches in the lower part of South Carolina. And I started doing some research there. And I found out that two of her three churches were churches that my great-great-grandfather had served. And I'm convinced that one of them was the actual building that he had served in. Because we drove up and there was a huge oak tree right at the front door, and I'm sure it was a small sapling back then. It was July the 4th weekend. In the lower part of South Carolina at that time, it's always 110 degrees. And the fellow who was supposed to come early and turn on the air conditioning didn't get there on time. I had searched for miles to try to find a bottle of water. I couldn't. At the time, I was considerably overweight, I was diabetic, and I nearly passed out in the pool. In fact, I had to stop in the middle and go back behind the chancel to the restroom and drink some water, even though it wasn't cold. About 4 years ago, my wife and I, led by God, left our church at 25 years. And we joined a small congregation that at the time had 18 to 25 people, and that's still what we have. And our little church is a dying congregation. Quite literally. The average age of our congregation is probably 78 years old. We have one left who's over 90, or two that are over 90. And when I joined the church 3 years ago, I was the youngest male member. So I told people when I met, I was the leader of the young adult crew. What I see and what I've read of this church, you're celebrating 101 years old. 101 years of ministry in the name of Jesus Christ. And I think that's just great. My little church is only 50 years old. We're but a baby. And when I see a vibrant, innovative congregation, complete with technology, and I want to thank you because I was able to watch several of your services on YouTube. So I had a sense of what I was getting into. Now, I didn't know I was going to have a nice music concert for the first 30 minutes that we got here. But I thought it was great, and I think it is great. The lesson that I'm speaking on today from Psalms is a psalm that is attributed to Moses. So it was one of the first psalms written, and Moses used it as almost as a daily prayer. And it talks about the passage of time. Now it says that our lives are 70, which is 70. And if we have enough strength, maybe 80. As a church, you've obviously expressed the strength and shown the strength that you can live beyond 80. You've reached 101. And I can foresee seeing what's here with some of the young people, that this church is going to live to be at least 200. And I hope if it does, you'll invite me back for that ceremony. Our days, however, are numbered. What we build today in the church will live on beyond our years. The psalm says, 1,000 years in your sight, O Lord, are but a blink of an eye. God is not limited by our time and our human limitations. God gives us God-sized dreams. 101 years ago, Preacher Dryman had a dream, and some people gathered around him and said, yes. He had this God-sized vision of let's put a church on this place and let's watch it grow. In South Carolina, we have a bishop who likes to challenge us with God-sized dreams. For a number of years at our annual conference, we've had a great day of service. Delegates to our annual conference go out into the Florence, South Carolina community where we have our annual conference, and we did work projects. We would go to nursing homes, or we would go to children's hospitals, or we would help do landscaping or rebuilding dilapidated homes in the Florence area. I knew Bishop came along and he gave us a God-sized vision last year. In our district in Greenville, we had a young man who was 13 years old. He attended a youth rally in Chicago one year and learned about a program called Stop Hunger Now. And he came back to Greenville, South Carolina and presented our Connectional Ministries team with a God-sized vision. He says, for our district great day of service, I want us to pack 285,000 meals. And these are little meals in a quart-sized baggie. And he says, we can do it. And the adults said, if he asks for it, we're going to try to do it. So we set in motion to get all of the churches in our district, about 72 of them, to come together in one day. We had over 1,200 volunteers, came in, all the material was there. We were in a church gymnasium, and we packed 285,000 meals. But this young man wasn't done yet. Now, in order to do this, we were supposed to raise $85,000 to pay for the materials. We didn't make $85,000. We raised $131,000. So the youth of the district got together and did another packing event and packaged another 35,000 meals. Was this young man done yet? No. He went to his school district and said, I want my school to have a packing event. Well, to get a school district to do something religious took a lot of convincing. He had this God-sized vision. He convinced the school district to let him do it. So his middle school packed another 285,000 meals. He wasn't done yet. He had set a goal to be personally responsible to pack 1 million meals. So he went to our annual conference and said, for our great day of service, we want to set up a packing event in the banquet hall for the Florence Civic Center. And we packaged another 285,000 meals with about 1,000 volunteers, and we did it in 6 hours. A God-sized vision, a God-sized dream. This year, our God-sized vision, we have a section of South Carolina called the Corridor of Shame. It runs along Interstate 95 in the lower part of the state. It's an area of extreme poverty and poor education. That's why we call it the Corridor of Shame. And Bishop Holston challenged us. We need to put books in the hands of these children. But that wasn't enough. We wanted to put leaning on the United Methodist Church focus on children in poverty, as we're doing these 4 years. We decided that we would expand and not just do the Corridor of Shame, but we want to put a book in the hand of every child in the state of South Carolina who lives in poverty. And our God-sized vision is to collect 1 million books to be distributed to children in South Carolina. We ask every church to contribute 1,000 books, because we have about 1,000 churches in our conference. I'm proud to say my little church with only 12 families, we are contributing 1,024 books to this effort. And we'll know a week from Tuesday whether or not we reached our median, because our annual conference begins next Sunday. The United Methodist Church has some God-sized visions over the past, and I'm sure you've been a part of them. About, I think it's 20 years now, the United Methodist Church had a God-sized vision to put a university in Africa. And we founded Africa University. And through our apportionments, we support that university. With these God-sized projects, we tell the world that we're there to help. Another God-sized effort of the United Methodist Church is in our United Methodist Committee on Relief. Whenever there's a disaster, natural or otherwise, the United Methodist Committee on Relief is usually the first agency on the scene. Through our apportionments and through our special offerings on the great day of service, we pay for all the administrative costs. So when individuals and individual churches contribute money to an effort, every penny of that money goes directly to relief aid. And most often, the United Methodist Church and our Committee on Relief is the last agency to leave. It's just been 2 years since we left after Katrina. We were there for 7 years. Because we believe in an all-powerful God, there is no limit to what we can do as an individual congregation and as a church. The psalmist takes seriously the passing of years, and the church takes seriously the passing of time of its members. Every year at church conference, we celebrate those who have joined the church triumphant. And having read your history, this church has many saints who have gone on before. I mentioned earlier that my church is a dying church. Every year at annual conference, we have a solemn ceremony where we recognize churches that are being discontinued, that are closing for one reason or another. It is one of the most solemn parts of our annual conference, where we say goodbye to the life of the congregation. I've been brought to tears sometimes when you read the stories of these churches. We're thankful to the church for its ministry and mission. And we look at the heritage that it has left behind. There may have been times in the life of this church where somebody said, let's just give up. But I can see from the folks that are here today that have come back to celebrate homecoming, that that's just not in your DNA. That the church will survive. I look at my church and the age of our congregation. As Tony Campolo, a well-known preacher, always says, when he looks out, there are an awful lot of Q-tips in the room. But I look here and I see brown hair, red hair. I look at my congregation, except for maybe one or two who are artificially. I look at my church and I wonder how much longer we can survive. But even with our numbers, we are a vibrant congregation. We take care of one another. Now, we might not be as technologically advanced as you are, but we've even tried contemporary worship. We put up a screen and put the words and the music and all of that. I was impressed that you had the CD. I had those too. Last Sunday, my pianist was missing, and the substitute that we usually call on, she was unavailable. So I burned a CD and we played the music over the band. The worst part about those CDs is that they don't have those natural pauses that a pianist can give you, because it keeps going. And it's hard to keep up with. Yeah, I see all the head shaking. And when I heard that, I said, okay, I got to pick up the tempo a little bit. But there's joy in ministry in a small church. You walk into this place, and when I walk into, and I've been partial to small churches for years, I know when there's a stranger in the room. It's like when Vic and Janet and I were at Furman. Furman was a small school, about 2,500 students. We might not have known everybody, but we knew when there was a stranger on campus, because we didn't recognize them. Well, they might have looked a little different. Although Janet and Vic haven't changed in the 40 years that I've known them. I think they're both wearing glasses now, and I'm not sure they were. But the history that I read of this church is evident of your commitment to being in ministry for Jesus Christ. This church was built out of the fire revival, a spirit-filled experience. And I still sense it today. And so this church is going to survive. It's going to go on and on. All churches experience hardships, and I'm sure this is not unlike those. As time passes, we lose some of our abilities. We lose some of our energy. We lose some of our enthusiasm. But God will prepare us. God will strengthen us. And God will sustain us. In verse 16 of Psalm 90, it says, "Let your word be manifest to your servants." Let your word be manifest to your servants. And we are God's servants. Now, we're not worthy of any divine assistance. Yet in the life of the church, we rely so much on that assistance. We depend on it. And it's there for the taking. To ask for God's grace. But it's up to us to ask for it. We can't just expect Him to give it to us. We have to ask for it. Lord, help us. The psalm says that the favor of the Lord our God be upon us, and establish the work of our hands. Yes, establish the work of our hands. 101 years ago, a few people got together and built a church. Now, I noticed in your history that only once was there a construction company involved. Everybody else just pitched in and built it. The work of your hands. And the glory of the Lord our God is manifested in that work. On this place. At that time and today. God's favor has been on the work of the hands of the people of Drymond's Chapel United Methodist Church. Thanks be to God. And let the whole church sing. Amen. Amen.
Aren't we grateful that we have that 101 years to celebrate? And we're thankful for Mike reminding us that we are part of a heritage that's even greater in the United Methodist Church. So we are so thankful for your words today, Mike, and for this opportunity. We're going to sing now. I love this hymn. You don't know the words that often to it, but you know the tune real well. And are we yet alive? And shall we see each other's face? Glory and thanks to Jesus for his almighty grace that created Griman's Chapel and gave us 101 years in the past. But what we are going to do in the future is up to us. Let us stand and sing together. And I believe we're going to have our organist from the back. celebration, and we go now to enjoy a wonderful meal together. And as we go from this place, know that you belong here. You have been given a heritage here, and you are called on to live it out into the future for the heritage of those who come after us. May God bless you and keep you and give you grace as we walk this way together. Amen.
Amen.
And we got some great music to continue here as we go today. May God bless you, and let's gather in the fellowship hall.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Members of
Yeah, we're leaving Sunday. Yeah, sorry for any Greenwood, okay. I know the name.
We're good. The lady and I don't know her name is, they're working with the supervisor coming here.
Okay.
We're looking forward to it.
Oh, good, good. Really?
This is my mom.
Drama trouble, been around a long time.
Got some stuff in front of you.
Okay. I read the history of it.
Nice picture, Junior.
You must have, that must have been before you were born.
All right.
Right? I'm gonna go put this stuff in the car. I understand this church is not like all the Methodist churches. When you turn the key, the oven comes on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Look at it,